This might actually be working. My God. Don't even know what to do now. Jeez. Okay. I can figure this out. I'm just starting to set up Streamlabs, OBS, doohickey thing. So forgive me for being like, and not being able to figure out what the hell I'm doing. But I think I've got it. Okay. So, I've got stuff there and things over here and whatnot. And by the way, Mr. Crit Dice Gaming, thank you for the follow. I heard that while I was trying to get everything running. So thank you. Lots of love. So what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be... Do you hear that? You hear the bird? Okay. It's 2:30 in the morning, and this bird is going off. And he does this every night. And during the day, I have to deal with, lawnmowers and leaf blowers and edge trimmers and all kinds of lawn care equipment and garbage trucks and FedEx and UPS delivery trucks and all kinds of stuff like that. Things making noise. And so I thought to myself, I am no legend, sir. I didn't think to myself that I'm no legend. I'm just responding to you, Mr. Crit Dice Gaming. Oh, sorry, fond memories coming back of many hours playing different crews, but anyway. So yeah, this bird, there's noise. And I'm thinking I could just work at night when there's no sound. Now he shuts up. So the reason that I wanted to try to throw this live stream together and see if I could actually get this to work. Well, I miss you too. Every now and again, I'll see tweets come in from you, and I'm like, I miss it. Just it sounds bad to say that I miss the contention between us. I miss the contention between our characters, our two crews, because I think that's a lot of fun. And it was just we used to do it's called the City of Mist. It was a lovely little RPG, and we had 3 different crews. We had a Tuesday night crew, a Wednesday night crew, and a Thursday night crew, and all operating as speaking of, there's Video Star Cowboy, who was our GM for all 3 things. It was a great game. It was a great game. If I had a BB gun, I'm normally not one for violence against animals because, I often play a druid, and I love druids. I think they're great, and I like animals. But that bird is pissing me off. He's really pissing me off. Makes it very difficult to work. Speaking of work, why did I start this? Part of it was just to chat, and part of it was to see if I could get the stream up and working. Because the last time I tried this, the audio was all crackly and everything sounded horrible and nasty. And I eventually... Chaotix and I tried to work through figuring out what the hell it was, and it was just crazy. I can't hurt the bird. He's like across the street in some tree, and I don't know where he is. Plus, I don't have any way to hurt the bird, and I really wouldn't anyway. If I wanted to, I could close the window, and I could probably put some more blankets over the window, and it would cut out most of the sound. I'm editing tonight, so it doesn't really matter if he's making noise. It just means that I can't record. Fortunately, I have a lot of editing to do, so it's fine. Sod! That bird, it's not illegal. No. Anyway, so the audiobook that I am in the process of narrating this evening is one that was written by a friend of Sod and myself, by Gregory Wilson, also known as Arvin Elleron, here on, and Video Store Cowboy's friend as well, because he streams Esper Genesis on some Fridays, with Arvin Elleron here on Twitch. And this is a book that he wrote some years ago. and he asked me to narrate it some years ago. And I narrated it, and everything was great. And then there was some change of management, not between me and Arv, but upstream stuff. And they were like, wait, don't finish it, don't finish it. We'll work on it later. And I was like, okay, all right. And so, thank you, Saad, for the follow. Um, go. Um, thank you, Johnny. Have a good night. Get lots of great sleep and whatnot. Um, the I can't take down the tree because I suspect that's my neighbor's prize tree, so I'm not going to do that. Anyway, where was I? What was I talking about? I was talking about something. Arv's book, and so just this crazy, undulating, shifting, priorities. And hang on, no, we'll do it this way. So ultimately, now the time has come to say, okay, here's the finished book. I went back and I listened to it, and it sounded awful because I was using different software back then. I didn't have things set up quite right. And listening to it now, after I've had a couple more years' experience, I'm like, there's no way. There's no way I'm going to put this thing out there. This sounds like crap. No. So I decided I'll just start over again. And so I recorded the first half of the book, and now I'm going through and editing the chapters as I go. So that's what we're working on here as I hit this transition button. And you get this thing over here, which I should probably look at. So yes, it's called Gray Shade. It is a novel by Gregory Wilson, also known as Arvin Elleron on Twitch, as I said. I'm in the process of editing chapter 3, and I hope this works. Because like I said, the last time I tried to stream this, it was crackly and horrible and nasty, but I think it was the cable. After Chaotix and I struggled for days to fix it, I think it was ultimately just the cable. And I think my USB harness, power supply, whatever. I think there was too much stuff on the USB chain in the computer, and it was just freaking out, I think is what it was. But so yeah, I'm as you can see from the area up here, I'm still fairly early on in the chapter. And I'm going to go through how I edit some of the things that I'm working on. So as you can see here, and I am kind of looking towards, I set it all up, so I'm sort of looking towards the thing. It's so cool. But as you can see right here, there's a vertical kind of dotted line, which is an editing mark or a cue mark. And basically, anytime I'm going through and I make a mistake, I fumble something that I'm trying to say, I hit M. This is on Adobe Audition. Back when I first recorded this, I was using Audacity, which is fine, but it's not quite the equal of something like Pro Tools or Reaper or Adobe Audition. Some creature deep within the interswamps. Yes, hello, Mr. Grimswolf. But anyway, so anytime I make a mistake, I tap the M key, it puts a cue marker there, and I can more easily find, if I show you the full file, there were a few boo-boos as we go through. That is not uncommon. There were like 137 markers in this, and it happens. You make mistakes while you're recording. You just need to go through and edit them out. It's all done in post. So we're going to zoom in, and we're going to go through, and I'll show you some of the various features of the software as we go. A wide flight of stairs led to its massive double doors, a large handle of iron hanging from the center of each, flanked on either side by small surface pillars. Flanked on either side by smooth surfaced pillars. Circular. Okay, so there was my boo-boo. The first part you heard was right. So this is the piece that I want. Flanked on either side by smooth surfaced pillars. Smooth surfaced pillars instead of whatever I said the first time around. So flanked on, I need to find the word flanked, which should be right after this breath. Flanked on either side. So I'll zoom in a little bit closer, and I will select this. Now the way I used to do these editing is I would select the part. Now, I'm not going to tell you how I used to do it. There's no point. I'll tell you how I do it now because I learned a much faster way of doing it. There is down here this little button called skip selection. And what it does is when it's selected, like this, when it's active, not selected, that sounds confusing. When it's active, what it does is it reads from, I'm going to point at it as though you can see where I'm pointing. That's why I have a mouse pointer. It starts reading from over here, reads through to this point, and then skips all of this, and then jumps right to this point and continues reading as though that white selected part was not there. And it plays out like this, swinging from the center of each, flanked on either side by swinging from the center of each. That'll work. So I delete that part, and the whole thing now sounds like this. A large handle of iron hanging from the center of each, flanked on either side by smooth-surfaced pillars. Okay, that works. So, we continue. Pillars. Circular windows. See, that's too long of a pause. By smooth surface. Oops, I still have the skip selection activated, which I don't want right now. I just want to hear if I've got any of the word on either side. No, there's a little bit of a breath in there, but that's okay. I don't mind that because I'm going to paste a half a second of silence right there. Side by smooth surfaced pillars. Circular windows of stained glass, inset with the image. Okay, so there's my next piece that I have to cut out. And we'll do that. Circular windows of stained glass, inset with images of Argoth's hammer, lined the side walls, and the tallest central spire stabbed defiantly toward the sky. Okay, now, right here, you can see a tiny little speck on the thing. It's usually easier to see if it's not highlighted like that. And then there's, of course, there's another one right here. Now, what this is... Shut up. You can hear that. That is a bubble in my spit popping. So that has to go. That's probably what this one is, too. Maybe. It's one of the problems when you're doing voice acting is the longer you talk, the more your mouth works and everything, and more air passes across the membranes of your mouth, and as more air passes across it, it dries out. So your saliva starts to thicken the more you talk. That is why you keep a glass of water nearby, just in case. And you might want to just take a big swig. Don't do that. You're not trying to rehydrate yourself. I mean, you do have to do that too. But in this case, all you're trying to do is moisten things. So tiny little sip. Just enough to moisten everything back up and you're fine. For those of you who hate the word moisten, too bad. And so we paste. Have a second of silence. Toward the sky. I climbed the stairs quickly. So now there, it sounds to me, to my ear, that a half a second is too short. And the tallest central spire stabbed defiantly toward the sky. I climbed this. I think that's too short. I am going to paste another half second, but I'm going to select part of it and remove it. So now we've got probably about 3/4 of a second. Stabbed defiantly toward the sky. I climbed the stairs quickly, but as I set foot on the top step, I hesitated and looked around. All seemed as okay. This damned bird. And looked around. All seemed as quiet as when I had entered the district, but something was out of place. I sniffed the air, and a faint scent of something. In here, and a faint scent of, hear the click? There's a click right in the middle of it. Faint scent of, that's another bubble. And it's right in here. So if you zoom in real tight, that might be a little too tight, but you can eventually locate it. That gets annoying, by the way. And a Okay, it's not in there. If you're wanting to be a narrator and you hate the sound of your own voice, you're not going to enjoy this process. Wait. It's still there. Now it's gone. So wherever it is, it's right in here. So let's come in and see if we can find it. Now, generally, what you can do is you can look at the waveform and you'll see part that doesn't look right. It doesn't match the progressive waveforms around it. So you can usually find them visually when you're looking at them. Now, if you look at this one, just follow the peaks and everything. But this one right here looks different from everything else around it. And that's probably where that click is. So what we need to do is we need to take out this portion, but you can't just select that portion and cut it out, because then when you're doing the playback, there'll be this weird kind of in the thing, because you have to take out, like I said, there's a pattern to it. You have to take out an entire section of the waveform so that once it's removed, the pattern is maintained. Otherwise, it's going to sound weird. So what we need to do is we need to find, and whenever you're editing these things out, you want to come right to the point where the waveform crosses the zero line, this middle line right here. So we know we want to take out this piece right here. So we're going to take from right here, where it's coming up across the line, to this point where it's coming up across the line. That is a full section of the wave. So we delete it. The rest of the waveform looks intact. And if we did it right, that click won't be there. And a faint scent of... I didn't do it right. That click is still there, so I missed it. But, so we'll Control Z to put that back in there. That means that this click is on one side or the other side. And I'm going to go backwards. Take out the previous waveform to here. Take that out. See if that did it. And a faint scent of... That was it. Now it's gone. And we can continue. And a faint scent of something reached me. I knew I was being overcautious. I knew I was... See, here, the reason that I decided I would do it a separate take, you can see how much louder this part is than this part. And it's not that I pronounced anything wrong or whatever. In this particular section of the thing, Graysheet is trying to, he's getting into a kind of a stealth mode. He's like, he's analyzing the sounds of what should be silence around it, but there's something not right. And so he's kind of getting a little bit more stealthy and scanning and trying to be quiet and pay attention to his surroundings. So I didn't want it to be a big, loud hit, which is why I decided to change the thing. So I'm going to take this whole thing, paste a half a second of silence. Reach me. I knew I was being overcautious, but I was still worried about the earlier mission, and in my profession, overcautiousness was considerably less troublesome. Right there, more troublesome. Overcautiousness was considerably less troubling than carelessness. And I said troublesome instead of troubling, so. And it doesn't seem like, well, that's not that big of a deal, right? The author's words, you really need to do what you can to stay as close to them as possible. I think this was about here. Overcautiousness. Yeah? Yeah. All right, so we can take all of this out. My profession, overcautiousness was considerably less troubling than carelessness. So I lowered... Oops. There were two things there that caused me to do that. One was, I needed to clear my throat. The other one was this right here. There's another click. That was actually my teeth clicking together. So no, that has to go. Carelessness. So I lowered my hands to my side and closed my eyes, focusing my senses and concentrating on the external world. I held my breath and let the sound wash. I I think I said sound, whereas it should have been sounds, plural. There was somebody driving by in the middle of the night. The world. I held my breath and let the sounds wash over me. So that was the thing. I said sound instead of sounds, so I had to change it. The rustling of bats' wings hanging under the church's eaves, the padding of a cat's feet creeping along the side of the cathedral, and the faint squeaks of the rats scurrying ahead of it, the gurgling of water dripping from a nearby aqueduct, and the rustle of cloth behind the pillar to the right. Dun dun dun! I've read this book several times. You have to when you're doing narration. When somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, will you narrate this book?" Your first thing is like, "What can you tell me about it?" Get them to describe to you what the basic genre is, kind of what the elevator pitch of the story. And then if it's something that you're interested in, then you're like, "It's possible. Can I give it a read and see if it's..." Because there may be some things in the book that you don't want to cover at all. Some stories will have variations of violence that you find extremely distressing, and you don't want to bring. I mean, you literally, your job as a narrator is to bring these scenes to life, and to evoke these images. And that can, if this is something that you find, I don't want to use the word triggering, even though I kind of just did, but there are some things that you may find in books that you're like, I am not comfortable doing this. And if the author either cannot or will not communicate that these kinds of things are in there, and additionally, if you want to get into doing audiobooks, you should have a list of things that you're not comfortable narrating. And so when somebody comes to you and says, "I'd like you to narrate my story," you can hand them this list. It's kind of like a rider for somebody who's like, "Hey, we want your band to play over here." It's like, "Okay, well, here's our rider. We want a bowl of M&Ms with all the green ones taken out." The reason people do that is to see if people are actually paying attention to what is said in the rider. Anyway, it becomes part of your initial response to that thing. You're like, here are the things that I'm not comfortable with. Are any of these in your story? And you may not be dealing with the author directly. You may be dealing with the publisher. If they don't know if these things are in that book, then they haven't read it yet. They are not familiar with the source material, and they can't tell you. In my opinion, is like, why are you publishing this? You have no idea what's in it. I've forgotten where I was going with that sentence, but that was the thrust of it. And if you don't tell them, I'm really not comfortable with this, then they're not going to know. And if they don't know, they can't tell you, actually, there is some violence against animals or what have you in this story. So, okay, we understand if you don't want to do it. And then you decide whether it's like, well, can I read it, and I'll see if it's something that I'm can fuddle through. But the point being, you have to read this story before you're going to know whether or not you're going to be able to do it. You can kind of guess based on the elevator pitch, but ultimately you have to read the whole thing before you start, because as I have often said, if the main character dies in the end, it changes the way you say "once upon a time" in the beginning. So let's get back to speaking of the rustle of cloth behind the pillar to the right. Dun dun. Oh, I did that already. Okay. But I need to hear how much space there is. Off behind the pillar to the right. I drew breath. That is too long of a pause. Excuse me. So, half a second. Behind the pillar to the right. The reason I went, instead of putting like a full second or 3/4 of a second in this, is he's just locked on. He's like, that's what's not right. The sound of the rustling of a cloth behind that pillar. That's what's got my spider sense kind of tingling. Now that he's locked on to what's wrong, it's time for action. So I don't want a long pause there. Cloth behind the pillar to the right. I drew breath again, letting my shoulders slump. Then I rolled to my right and came up with my kukuri and pointed at the throat of my observer, who stamp, and pointed at the throat of my observer, who stumbled backwards. I think I started to say stammered, which is not the word. It should be stumbled. So pointed at the throat and pointed at the throat with my kukuri and pointed at. So the word "and," as you can see, is kind of blurred into and. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the word "point" as my edit point, and we'll take a listen to the thing without the selection in. And no. And to my right and came up with my kukuri and pointed at the throat of my observer. No. To my right and came up with my kukuri and pointed at the throat of my observer, who stumbled to my right and came. Okay, so we delete that. I think I expanded the leader and trailer a little bit too far. Pointed at the throat of my. No, I needed the whole thing. Then I rolled to my right and came up with my kukuri and pointed at the throat of my observer, who stumbled backwards. Yes, that will work. Now I'm not going to edit the whole thing. For one, I don't want to spoil the book for you guys. For two, you can see up here just how much longer I have to work, and this is probably going to take me. Oh, let's see. That selection is. Well, actually, I don't have it selected, but let's select it here. That is 26 minutes, roughly. That vaguely half hour will probably take me an hour and a half to edit. And if I'm talking to you guys, that's going to slow me down a lot. So, no. So let's zoom this back down. Rose and strode. Okay. Dripping from a nearby aqueduct and. Yeah, know that part. Who stumbled backwards. There we go. That's where I'm supposed to be. I rose and strode toward him, blade raised. Okay. I rose. Yeah. Okay, so this piece needs to go. Hey, no problem, Slade, at all. Thank you very much for coming and hanging out and for the follow, as you said before. Or as I said before, you didn't say it, I did. But yes, sweet dreams and all that stuff, and I hope to see you again. Who stumbled backwards. I rose and strode toward him, blade raised. And we'll shorten that up. Actually, I think these are the same. Wait, no! Yeah. Wait! Yeah. Okay, so. Blade raised. Wait, no! Argoth Justice is swift! Now, you look at the bottom, the VU meter at the bottom. Strode toward him, blade raised. No, not that, sorry. Wait, no! Argoth Justice is swift! You can see how it's getting into the red, right? I mean, it's almost clipping. It's not quite. You can see there's still a gap down here, and there's a bit of a gap up here. But it's kind of loud. But that's okay. Later on, once I'm finished with all of the editing and whatnot, I'll normalize all the volume and get it set to the proper volume levels and whatnot for Audible, which is where this will be published. The stranger. Oops, this is Swift. There's another click right there. The stranger cried, and I stopped in surprise. And his prize. And his retribution is stronger, I said after a moment. That's too long. That pause, I mean. Is stronger, I said after a moment, giving the. That's better. Countersign. The other gave a relieved sigh as he got to his feet. Good. Father Jant told me you would. Father Jant told. Yeah. Okay. Now, a lot of audiobook narrators will remove their breath sounds. Personally, I hate that. I think it removes some of the life from the story. If you remember the Lord of the Rings, yes, the Lord of the Rings, in the beginning during Bilbo's birthday party, there's a scene where Ian Holm, who's playing Bilbo, is sitting and he's telling the little Hobbit children about the scene with the trolls, and because of the sound, I mean that is a storyteller sitting there talking to you, and you're gonna hear him take breaths at various points. That gives life to a story in a way that a lot of people who are either they keep I keep saying they clip too tightly, but clipping is a different thing in audio. But they edit things so tightly that they remove all of the breath sounds, and it feels more like recitation, like you're reciting the lines of a story, not like you're narrating. There's a vibrancy that needs to be there. I mean, if you're narrating a technical manual, fine. You're not trying to act. That's not voice acting. That is very technical, dry reading, and it's important that come across that way. But for something that is meant to have a heartbeat to it, it's important that you, in my opinion, leave some of the breaths in. To his feet. Good. Okay, I'm going to shorten this. To his feet. Good. Father Jan told me you would come. Now, there's also a distinction between narration and dialogue, or rather, the narrator's voice and the dialogue of the characters. If I am going to remove breath sounds, it's much more likely going to be from the narrator's voice rather than from the living characters within the story. And stepping into the moonlight, the stranger might come. Yeah, that's too long. Come. And stepping into the moonlight, the stranger lowered the hood of his cloak. He was a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, with sandy brown hair and dark eyes, and around his neck he had a silver necklace which hung. He had a silver Okay, I think that's right about here. He had a silver necklace. Yep. So we will skip selection. Dark eyes. And around his neck he had a silver neck. Okay, that works well. He had a silver necklace on which hung a symbol of Argoth's hammer. He smiled sheepishly and bowed his head. I see. Too long of a pause. Way too long. Head. I see, I said with a frown. Also too long. Plus there's this. But his head. Not that. That. Don't want that in there. But I also want to shorten it. That might be too much, but we'll see. I see, I said with a frown. That's all right. It was nearly impossible that a stranger could have stayed on the cathedral. It was nearly... Yeah. So, given the fact that I'm going to wind up removing all of this, the sound of my breath here, it doesn't work for adding to the story, so I'm going to remove that. It's one of the situations where I said I would remove the narrator's breath. With a frown. It was nearly impossible that a stranger could have stayed on the cathedral's front steps without challenge, but given the events of the past few hours, I was none too certain about anything at the moment. And why did he tell you this? Are you a messenger? No, the young... Nuh-uh. You're a messenger. Are you a messenger? No. Still too long. Messenger? No. No. I mean, no. Yeah, no. Are you a messenger? No. There. The young man. No. The younger man said. Okay. So I'm going to take this, which is virtually undetectable, but it's still there and it bugs me. I'm going to half a second of silence, and then I'm going to take away most of that half second of silence. No, the younger man said a bit fiercely. I'm an apprentice, and... there's a pop right there. And, he faltered a bit. too long. He faltered a bit and absently fingered the symbol around his neck. I'm sorry, Acolyte. I didn't mean to speak out of turn. I'm on guard here, and Father Jant told me you would come sometime this evening. I did not smile. It was true that when I... I did not... Okay, here's another one. It looks like this is all normal. I did not smile. But there's this. Take that out. This evening, I did not smile. It was true. And we drop this to a half second. Sometime this evening, I did not smile. It was true that when I was an apprentice, I had almost spoken more quickly than I should, especially in the presence of my superiors. But I was more annoyed than amused. Still, if he was an impostor, it was a wholly convincing one. And your name, apprentice? That's a bit too long, and there's that click right there. Convincing one. And your name, apprentice? Ravel? Maurice Ravel? The composer of the Bolero? No. Apprentice? Ravel, he replied. I had heard the name. Ravel, he replied. That almost sounds robotic, the way he said that. I may change that later, he replied. I had heard the name, and I hadn't heard the name. Big difference between those two. Uh-oh. You see how this waveform looks right here? And it looks very similar here, which means that I probably flubbed something in this and started over again, which is why that this editing mark is here. I hadn't heard the name and had never seen his face. I had... So we take this out. Thusly. Slide. I hadn't heard the name and had never seen his face, but that was hardly surprising. There were many apprentices in Corel, and more involved in various missions outside the city. Yes? And then what? Oh, I was drinking. That's another thing, is your body makes weird noises when you're talking, especially for lengthy periods of time. And part of the reason why I don't usually live stream this thing is that people will hear these bodily noises and whatnot. Like when I'm starting to get thirsty and I decide, okay, not just a small sip, I'm going to chug something. And so they're listening to this gluck, 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 or burps or whatever. And A, I don't want to spoil the story. B, a lot of times I'm not allowed, because of an NDA or whatever, I'm not allowed to live stream the editing process because there's an NDA and they don't want to spoil the story. But also, I don't live stream very often because some people don't want to listen to me burp, or worse. Ugh. So let's take all of this out. Missions outside the city, but that was hardly surprising. There were many apprentices in Corel. Uh-oh. Okay. I need to... But that was hardly surprising. Okay. I hadn't heard the name and had never seen his face, but that was hard. Okay, so this is where that needs to cut through. Let's see how this sounds. Heard the name and had never seen his face, but that was hardly surprising. There we go. So all that goes. But that was hardly surprising. There were many apprentices in Corel, and more involved in various missions outside the city, and I only knew a handful of them. When I was an apprentice... Uh-oh. Like that. And that did clip. So that definitely has to come out. Boop. That was boop, not poop, by the way. And I only knew a handful of them. When I was an apprentice... I may have screwed up the emphasis on that. I think it probably should have been when I was an apprentice. I knew a handful of them. When I was an apprentice, I only knew Chaosthenes, the acolyte assigned. I'll see how it flows with the rest of the thing later on. Chaosthenes, the acolyte assigned to train me, and our friendship scroll over. And our friendship after I became an acolyte. And our friendship after I. Right. The acolyte assigned to train me. And our friendship after I became an acolyte. The acolyte. Is that what I'm supposed to be removing? And our friend. Yes, it is. Okay. The acolyte assigned to train me. And our friendship after I became an acolyte myself was unusual, like everything else with my teacher. But why was an apprentice guarding the cathedral at all? I'm probably not going to stream this for much longer. Everything else with my teacher. But why was an apprentice guarding the cathedral at all? There were always at least There were always at least 6 acolytes within the building, and other defenses beyond the humankind. And if there were an added danger, why leave it to an apprentice? And if there were an added danger, see there, the change in the emphasis is important. And if there were an added humankind, and if there were an added danger, why leave it to an apprentice? It's a good question. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call this here. This was mainly to test and see if I can still get this thing to work. And apparently I can, because nobody was saying, oh my God, you sound like a cyborg who's just been kicked in the nuts, regarding the horrible crackling and everything else of the audio. And I need to get to work on this and actually focus. So I may, in the future, stream a little bit more now that I know that I can. We'll see how it goes. But I don't know. We'll find out. Right. So thank you guys, those of you who have been here watching and listening and hopefully learning a thing or two about stuff that maybe you didn't know. And hopefully I'll see you guys back here again someday if I stream again sometime this decade. There's really not that much of this decade left, so, whatever. But, yeah, so ciao. And as I often say, be careless.